Hello and good morning, and welcome to the Aging Answers podcast. My name is Rob Fabian, and I am the Chief Community Engagement Officer for Age of Central Texas. We are a regional nonprofit organization that helps older adults and family caregivers to navigate the opportunities and the realities of aging and caregiving. On the first Wednesday of each month, we bring you our Aging Answers podcast to provide some wonderful information for you so that you can continue to age well here in Central Texas. Our podcasts are brought to us by our friends at HEB because no store does more for older adults and family caregivers here in Central Texas than my HEB.
You know HEB for quality fresh food at low prices to help you eat well. Now, HEB has primary care physicians and dietitians on staff to help you get and stay well. And because HEB believes affordable care should be accessible to all Texans, monthly memberships and cash payment options are available. Let HEB's team of highly reputable and experienced care providers help you on your health journey. Virtual and in-office visits are available. Visit heb.com/wellness to learn more today.
I am very glad to be joined today by Mary Jane Berry. She is the Executive Director for the Georgetown Area Parkinson's Support Group, and she has been a great friend of mine and to Age of Central Texas for many years. Mary Jane, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Well, I'm honored that you've even asked. So yes, and I'll be glad to share everything I know about Parkinson's.
That's fantastic, because that's what we want to talk about today. Let's talk about Parkinson's disease, because it is a condition that we've heard about, but a lot of people are not very familiar with it. So why don't you kind of walk us through what is Parkinson's and what we need to know about it?
All right, I'll be more than happy to. You know, one of the first things, I do have a PowerPoint to share, but my experience, just so that some of you guys would know, is I am a registered nurse and still very active and keep my license up. But roughly about almost 20 years ago, I started noticing some symptoms with my husband. We never could quite put our finger on it. We knew something was going on, and we would go to ear, nose, and throat doctor. We would go to the back doctor, the general practitioner doctor, with all of these vague symptoms. And it wasn't until he actually started with a little tremor that I started kind of putting all of these symptoms together. And when I did that, it was like, oh my goodness. And we realized it was Parkinson's. So I am a caregiver as well as the nurse, and then joined this the support group, and then eventually became, and I'm in my 12th year now as being a facilitator for the support group. And we just became a nonprofit, and we're now we're doing good, and we're trying to share and get the information out. So with all of that said, kind of as a background and where my experience comes from, I'd like to go on and just share and start a presentation. Would it be okay, Rob?
That would be fantastic.
Okay, so we'll just go right here. Let me know if you can see it okay. Is everything all right?
Perfect.
Super. And we're known as Georgetown Area Parkinson's Support Group. Now, there's quite a few Parkinson's support groups in the Central Texas area, and we work very closely with all of them. So I always share that we're all on the same team and to help those in the Parkinson community. But we're also Parkinson's and movement disorders, because in addition to Parkinson's, there's atypical Parkinson's, as well as essential tremors and other neurological diseases that we can help out with some of the same type of treatments that we do here. So I'll be sharing that. But one of the things I want to be sure and stress is there's hope. There's hope, and you can still live a good quality life with Parkinson's. And I hope to be sure and share that in this presentation. We are, again, just what we have. We've got it down here, the support group, and I use a little thing that we bridge the gaps. That it was kind of a play off GAPS, Georgetown Area Parkinson Support, and then GAPS. So that's kind of how we did that. And then, of course, I have a mission statement and the whole works. And this is the visual that I kind of chose. But more importantly, was just to share that there is hope. You know, so many people think that when they get Parkinson's, that's it. Their life is over. They're going to die. In actuality, you do not die of Parkinson's, interesting enough. Now, granted, it makes life harder and it makes life slower in certain aspects, but it's not Parkinson's that'll kill you. It's some of the other things as we age that will get you. And we can talk about that also as we go on. And of course, I'm open to take any questions if there's any on chat, by all means. Just to give you a brief history, Parkinson's disease was actually documented way back before 1817 when it was first described by Dr. James Parkinson's. He described it and wrote a document on it, which was called an essay on the shaking palsy, was what it was actually called at that point in time. But they have gone back in research and way earlier times and have documented some of these same symptoms. But since he published it in 1817, it took the name as Parkinson's for this disease. And so many people ask me, and one of the first questions that they ask is, what causes Parkinson's? What can we do to prevent Parkinson's, and what causes it? Well, frankly, we still do not know. We do think there's a genetic component as well as an environmental component with it. And right now, the Michael J. Fox Foundation is very, very active in trying to find out what causes Parkinson's. The point is, that is what Michael J. Fox, when he was diagnosed at age 28, and started the foundation, shortly in his 30s. But the point is he wanted to find a cure in his lifetime. We still have not found the cure, but they have identified some genes, and they're doing a lot of research on different genes, and these are free. So if anyone out there has Parkinson's and would like any genetic testing, it can be done free, which is really cool. I've got it on my website, which I'll share with you later. We also notice that there is a familiar pattern to it, meaning that sometimes we have father's sons, we have father's daughters, siblings that have it, but nothing can really pinpoint exactly why they have it and what's the cause. It makes it very, very frustrating. Some people think it's rural living and environmental and aspects with well water and herbicides and that sort of thing. But again, it's not been determined. So when they ask me what causes it, I had to say we really still do not know, but there are things that we know possibly could be contributing to it, genetics, environment, but we just really, really do not know. Who's at risk and the factors? The very typical age is 60 years of age to be diagnosed. And to be sincerely honest with you, that was exactly what my husband's age was when he was diagnosed. Although we were able to identify the signs and symptoms at least a good 5 years before. And as I have talked and been the support group leader for all of these 12 years now, that's what I've learned from just about everyone who has been diagnosed, is their signs and symptoms started a good 5 to 10 years before they were really diagnosed. Although the average age is 60 years to be diagnosed, the earliest person I've met that was diagnosed was 13 years of age. And that's just incredibly hard to believe. But they were able to diagnose. She's fine. She's in her 30s now. Life is a little tougher with Parkinson's, but she is going strong. So with that said, there is what we call early onset. Anybody who's younger than 50 years of age is called young onset Parkinson's disease. And again, why do they get it earlier when the average person is 60 years of age and older? When they get it, we just don't know. It says they're hereditary. We've already talked about that. Sex, men are more likely to develop Parkinson's. Women are catching up. And again, why? We don't know. Exposure to toxins maybe, but we do think that there's over 10 million people worldwide. So this is not just the United States. In fact, we've got a Parkinson Worldwide Coalition that is international, and this disease is prevalent everywhere. Interesting enough, a little side note, in Africa, sadly, they think that Parkinson is witchcraft. They think that these people, and that's just so sad. And we have a group that we kind of help out, and I'm active in with Facebook with them and share information. But the point is, they have to overcome that hurdle of witchcraft down there, whereas fortunately we don't worry about that here in the States. Next slide is what's happening. How do they actually get it? I've got a picture of the brain here, and deep inside the brain in the base of ganglia, there is what we call neurons. And these neurons, these special neurons, in a normal condition, they transmit messages between each other, chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. And inside there is dopamine. This is part of the neurotransmitter. What we're finding is in Parkinson's that the neuron cells that create the dopamine die. And that's the whole point, is why do they die? That we just don't know. And but the fact that they do die, and it's actually thought that by the time you see a tremor in somebody's hand, that over 80% of those neurons have already died. Now, we still have billions and billions, but the point is that is the root cause. So they've identified what's going on, but sadly, why, we don't know yet. So that's where treatment comes in, because at least we can help out there. So specifically, the dopamine neurons of the brain that are in the midbrain, which is what I just showed you, are the ones that are affected. And dopamine is a chemical messenger that communicates. And so it's the lack of dopamine that contributes or causes Parkinson's. And when there's a decrease, the entire body is covered. One of the key symptoms that you see is the slowness of movement, which I'll go into a little bit more detail. But one of my husband's very, very first presenting symptoms was when he would walk, his arms were stiff right by his body. He didn't have a normal swing in the arms. And that's all part of that stiffness starting. And again, down at the very bottom, symptoms appear when there's about 80% of those dopamine producing cells that are damaged. So this is what people see. I love this slide to really indicate, because what people see are the tremors. They think, oh, it's Parkinson's when they see all this. Actually, there's a whole lot more going on. As you can see, from anxiety, bladder issues, cognitive issues, constipation, depression, difficulty sleeping, fatigue, loss of smell. I mean, you could read this too. I won't go through all of it. What I'd like to share with you is there's the earlier symptoms, again, is this stiffness and slowness of movement. Constipation, no, because as you outwardly see that, the same thing goes on in the gut. The whole digestive system, everything slows down. And sometimes that's the presenting symptom for a lot of Parkinson's folks, is the constipation. Now, this is why it's so easy for people to just blow it off and say it's aging, because a lot of these same symptoms occur as you age. But another one that's very characteristic of Parkinson's is acting out their dreams, sleep problems. And for my husband, yes, the constipation was there. Then he started acting out his dreams. For dreams in a man, they are very active. They're like they're always fighting, or they're always doing something, or they're saving the world, or they're in a war. It's just amazing. And I mean, we're talking just major movements. There are many spouses that share the bed with a person with Parkinson's that have been clobbered, and in some cases even like choked, because the dreams are so vivid. In fact, that's what my husband said. He says, my gosh, it's really kind of neat to dream it, because it's just like I'm right there in a movie, and it's just technicolor, and it's just amazing. But that is what happens with Parkinson's early on. So if somebody ever talks about their dreams and acting out their dreams, I mean, he's even jumped out of bed before and hit the wall. That's how vivid they are. Let's see, the lack of smell is another one. That's a very early onset symptom, and they just cannot smell at all, again, with my husband. And the handwriting, as we talked about the slowness of movement in just moving your arms, in just walking, The same thing happens with the handwriting. They'll start out perfect, and then it almost just becomes a line. So there are so many things involved with Parkinson's that we didn't even realize until, as we were identifying all of this stuff, the dopamine that our brain produces helps with so much of every aspect of our body and our life. It's amazing, as you can see right here. Again, the 4 primary symptoms you see, of course, is a tremor, but again, that's a later symptom. But slowness, the medical term for that is bradykinesia. Stiffness, they're very, very stiff. So many times they complain of back pain because they're stiff and they're kind of leaning forward. And then, of course, the poor balance. There's where you come into the falls, and that's what you have to be so careful with. Again, this is kind of what they see. When I was in nursing school in the early 70s, they referred to Parkinson as the old man disease. Well, actually, no, women can get it too, but that's what they referred to it as. But in actuality, we now know that younger people do get it. Again, here's all the symptoms, the shuffling walk. But the other thing that was very prevalent for my husband before he was ever diagnosed was the changes in the facial expression. You can almost see it. It's like their smile has changed. They just don't smile big like they used to. They call it a mask-like appearance. And so many people think that they're angry or they're mad because they don't smile like they normally did. And it's just kind of more of a blank, flat affect. When in actuality, this is still all part of the lack of dopamine, that the whole musculature and everything is just not working like it should. Again, as I've also shared, symptoms may appear years before any of the motor symptoms, and we've already talked about that. Of course, depression and anxiety is always right there too. Again, I was noticing all these things with my husband. I knew something which just wasn't right. It was just so weird, but they present so individualized. That's why we say that it's a good 5 to 10 years before they were actually diagnosed, because of the way the symptoms present themselves. Diagnosing PD, how do they actually diagnose it? It's really on the interview and the physical examination by the physician. The point is, there's no biomarker. Like in some diseases, you can do a scan, blood test, pathology reports. You really cannot do that with Parkinson's. Yes, they are finding there's a DAT scan that you can do that can help show if there's some neuron damage, but it's not totally conclusive of Parkinson per se, because it could be other neurological. They are starting to do what they call cell or skin biopsies, where they can see some changes. Again, very characteristic of Parkinson's, but it's not always specifically Parkinson's. So how do they diagnose? Through the history, through the symptoms, and then they give them dopamine. And if there is improvement in dopamine in their physical manner and their presentation, and they feel better, and lack of the symptoms have decreased, and they've responded to the dopamine, then that's conclusive that they have Parkinson's. And even though my husband didn't realize it, and several times when he was on the dopamine medication, he started feeling better. He says, well, see, I don't really have Parkinson's because all those symptoms are gone, and I don't need this. The fact that he wanted to get off of the medication early on, it's not like a medication that's going to save his life. It's going to help with the symptoms. So I told him, said, okay, if you want to get off of it, you can get off of it. And he did. And within a week, all the symptoms were back, and they seemed even stronger. So the point is, the dopamine that we're able to give in treatment is really good. And I'll get into that a little bit more, because there's so many different kinds of dopamine derivative treatments that we can do. Cousins of Parkinson's. We call them cousins of Parkinson's, or they're atypical Parkinson's. They will all initially present as just your generic Parkinson disease. But there could be drug-induced Parkinsonism. Some of your medications cause these very same symptoms. But there's some really bad guys out there, the PSP, CBD, MSA, and again, you can read all this, so I won't read them all out to you. Vascular Parkinson's. Vascular Parkinsonism is what former President Daddy George Bush had. You remember? That was the vascular Parkinsonisms, but then there's also Lewy body. All of these will initially present as just your generic Parkinson disease, but because of the rapid progression of the disease, because of the severity of the symptoms, they can then differentiate and identify exactly where they are and what they are. These are the bad guys. The prognosis of these are much shorter in time. My husband now has had Parkinson for over 20 years, and we still go on vacations. Again, it makes life a little harder, and there's slowness, and we kind of have to take considerations. He uses now a walker and a wheelchair, but yet we still go. We don't let it stop us. Okay, we encourage people to have a whole management team with the Parkinson's disease. I mean, you've got, of course, your neurologist. Now, I want to share one thing with you. So many people will, if they have Parkinson's, they will go to a neurologist. But what we recommend is a movement disorder specialist neurologist. These are neurologists that are specifically trained for Parkinson and movement disorder diseases. For instance, if you have cancer, and it's a head and neck, you're going to go to the head and neck oncologist versus the breast oncologist. You're going to go to the specialty of the disease. And that's what we recommend with Parkinson's disease. Sadly, though, there's not that many neurologists that are specifically trained in movement disorders. So you have to find them. When I say we because Parkinson affects both of us, but when my husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's, right here in Central Texas area, we only had one movement disorder specialist. This was in the early 2000s. However, we now have 7 that are right here in Central Texas. And I do know that there are people that are coming from other states that come right here in this area. I know there are people that have moved to the Central Texas area only so they can be closer to their doctors. So it's very important to have a neurologist. But you can see speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, primary care physician, just to oversee all the other diseases that are along, or your other health issues. As well as family and caregivers. But of course, the important one I want to point out is the community support group. And that's where I come in. We have a support group. We provide information. We have meetings, and I'll go into more detail of that. But this is all part of the management team that helps with Parkinson's. Treating Parkinson's, as you can see, medication is kind of like number 3 on the list right here. Exercise is the number 1. In regards to the fact that that's the only thing that's been proven to maybe slow the progression of Parkinson's. There's no cure for it. But we have found that those that exercise and start an exercise program actually start feeling better. They start doing a lot better. So we offer exercise as part of our support group. It's offered in the Austin area, and Power for Parkinson's. There's some fabulous opportunities to exercise, but it doesn't have to be specific. It could even just be walking. Going for a walk every day would be great. Eating right. They really recommend the Mediterranean type diet. You know, more of your fruits and vegetables, and moving up that way with Mediterranean. Medications, we have many medications out there and many different ways that they treat, because the key thing is you want to get the dopamine back into the system. However, you sometimes need other meds that will help that dopamine get in. So there is a whole list of medications, and that's why a movement disorder specialist is the right doc to go to help you figure that out. Another treatment is surgery, meaning deep brain stimulation. People go, oh, I don't want to have brain surgery. We actually have now found that that is very beneficial for some of our Parkinson folks. Not everybody's a candidate for it, but for some of them, yes. I want to say right now, though, that deep brain stimulation is very, very helpful and beneficial to those with essential tremors. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about what is the difference between essential tremor and Parkinson's disease. And there's a key difference, but deep brain stimulation for essential tremors is fabulous. And then, of course, the complementary and alternative approaches therapy. That's going to be massage therapy. That some people like acupuncture. Some people just do other things, meditation, and all of those are very good. But again, as we just stressed, exercise is important. We have in physical therapy a thing called LSVT big. And what that means is big movements. You're really moving big, you're exaggerating your movements. And that's part of what we're talking about. There's also LSVT loud, which is how to speak, because just as I was sharing all of these symptoms, the voice is also affected, the larynx, because what happens is they often have a very soft voice. They have a soft voice, they start speaking more rapid, and they do not enunciate well. But in addition to LSVT loud, there's also Speak Loud. There's other programs out there. And in fact, Texas State University has their speech therapy department right here. And they like to use a lot of our Parkinson members for the students to work with. And so weekly they have classes, as well as this is a class that I even offer for all of our members, but anybody that wants to come that needs speech therapy. We have a speech therapist that comes, and again, they're all free of charge. Walking, we just talked about that, but of course, like dancing, chair yoga, Tai Chi, boxing, and bicycling are all good. Some people cannot bicycle because the balance is so bad, and that's okay. It has to be more of like a three-wheeled bicycle. But boxing is really, really good. There's a thing that we call, which is called rock steady boxing. It's been in the news a lot. And it is an excellent program. Again, no, it supports the movements. And so many people think boxing that you're in a ring and you're doing that. No, this is non-contact boxing. Yes, you do have boxing gloves, and yes, you hit against one of the boxing devices. I don't even know what they call it exactly, but one of those things they hit against. But anyway, you can still do that, but then they go around. It's a lot of circuit training. It's very good, very intensive, and that's what they need. 3 days a week they offer it here in the Georgetown area, but it's also in Austin area. It's called 413 Boxing, and it's boxing and fitness. It's a wonderful program, but there's also a Rock Steady program in our Central Texas area. So boxing is an excellent exercise. But again, it says we recommend you always talk to your doctor before starting any exercise programs. We offer free part of our program on Mondays, so that vocal exercise music therapy I was telling you about. We've also talked to Sun City. I happen to live in Sun City in Georgetown, but they will even help out and offer fitness classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Wednesday, we were having a dancing class. We actually know that dancing is good because you have to think about the steps as well as movement. And you also have a partner that sometimes helps you, obviously supporting you. So those are good. And then again, I mentioned boxing with Parkinson's, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, again in Austin and in Georgetown. And then in Austin, and what you have that even goes into Round Rock too, because they have, I think, something like 10 or 12 locations. Power for Parkinson classes, wonderful program. And guess what? They're all free except for the 413 boxing. There is a fee with that one, but we do now have scholarships to help out. So if anyone ever wants to take a class, but yet they don't have the financial means, particularly there for the boxing, we can get you a scholarship. So basically everything is free for you, and we just encourage it so very much. This was an example in our Georgetown classes of people dancing, and we just had a lot of fun with that. We did chair yoga, and we're on hold right now with chair yoga, but we'll be starting it back up. But there's other classes out there that we can do. This is what it looks like for boxing with Parkinson's, and they have fun. So it's not a contact. You don't have to worry about getting beat up. But it is a lot of fun. And then, of course, singing with Parkinson's. The singing helps strengthen the vocal cords and helps with speaking with intent. So that's part of our vocal exercise and singing. And again, I mentioned Power for Parkinson's. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube. So even if you go on YouTube and you just type in Parkinson exercises. You would be surprised how much is going to pop up, and you could be right there in your home, totally free of charge. So I want to encourage everybody to do that. You cannot even read this slide, but this is all of the different medications. There's many different medications and many different ways that they will interact to help your Parkinson. And that's why you need a specialist to help you with your meds. The deep brain stimulation, I mentioned that. Again, you don't worry about it destroying healthy brain tissue. They have become so sophisticated now that they can pinpoint exactly where they put the probes in, and they stay there and they just do wonderful. And it's amazing. You can regulate it. In one of my meetings I had a gentleman who had the deep brain stimulation, and then he turned off his, there's a device that how you can turn it on or turn it off or adjust it. And long story short, when he turned it off, he was just all over the place. And it's amazing the progress that this does. So don't let it scare you, because it's really good. We do have a deep brain stimulation support group. So we meet monthly. And so if you have any questions on it, it's open to anyone to learn about. You know, so many people want to know about Parkinson's, and they many times people feel like it's just them. It's like, why me? There's many celebrities who you may not have realized had Parkinson's. Muhammad Ali, George Wallace, Billy Graham, Estelle Getty, Linda Ronstadt, Johnny Cash, Michael J. Fox, and of course, Daddy George Bush, which you see the picture there. Now, interesting enough, all of these folks were diagnosed initially with Parkinson's, but I can go on and tell you, President George Bush, Daddy George Bush, had the vascular Parkinsonism. Linda Ronstadt has what we call the PSP. She has the very atypical one, which is devastating. So please know that they're all out there. Now, Michael J. Fox was diagnosed at age 28. He has your typical Parkinson's. So he's now, I think he's in his early 50s now. So he's lived with it for a long time. So having Parkinson's is not a death sentence. Usually those that they die with Parkinson's. They usually die because of aspiration pneumonia or falls that have been contributed to aspiration pneumonia and total shutdown, or other comorbidities such as a stroke, such as cancer, other things like that. So we share that you don't die because of Parkinson's, but you'll die with Parkinson's. All right. Now, I wanted to share with you about essential tremors versus a Parkinson tremor. An essential tremor basically affects the head and the voice. You see that very, very often where somebody is moving constantly. And an essential tremor is kind of like a motion tremor. It's always there, whereas a Parkinson tremor will tend to stop when you concentrate on something. And they say a Parkinson tremor is more the resting tremor. When you're just sitting there, you'll just see that arm moving. However, if you go to paint, people can paint with Parkinson's because they're concentrated and they can slow, the hand movements down. Playing pool, some are billiards. You go to play billiards, you think, oh my gosh, you can't hit the ball. Actually, a Parkinson patient can play that very well. They can play a ping pong well because they can control whenever they're just really concentrated controlling. Essential tremor, though, is at all times, and it's very, very difficult to control. But what I have seen personally is the DBS just does amazing work with essential tremors. Katharine Hepburn is a classic example of someone with essential tremor. Do you remember you heard it in her voice that she was always moving her head around? That's just the differences. We have a website. Our website is Georgetown Area Parkinson Support Group. You, by all means, you can even Google it. And I have lots of information on my website. We also have a Facebook site, and anybody can be a part of that. It's not a social site. I don't just put a lot of pictures of anybody. I've gotten in touch with all the foundations, so it's all very related to information and educational opportunities. And I just want to share the positive aspects. I mean, again, it's not a death sentence to have Parkinson's. There's treatments out there, and every day, I mean, just since we have been in this, my husband and I, for, almost 20 years, there's new medications constantly coming out, new options constantly coming out. We're exercising, education. We're going to go on a cruise next week. We don't let Parkinson's stop us. It slows us down, but it will not stop us. And that's the key thing. And as I always share, I've got support group meetings on the fourth Thursday of every month, except November, December. Anybody is welcome to come, family, friends, everything is totally free. And what I always share is no one should face Parkinson alone. It's we're just here to help each other. And so with that said, that pretty much kind of concludes a little presentation. I hope that answers some of the question that you were asking and wanted me to cover, Rob.
That was fantastic. What an amazing amount of information. I learned so much from that. Thank you so much. Yeah, I've had the privilege of getting to visit a lot of your support group meetings and got to witness the boxing in person. And it was just wonderful. Everybody who participates in it loves it so much and talks about how it really helps them in being able to concentrate and control their movements. I also had the privilege of getting to see a doctor who had the deep brain stimulation who was done, and he demonstrated personally that he turned off the device. And as you mentioned, his tremors were just so severe that he could not even pick up a glass,
Yes.
much less pour water into it. But then when he turned it back on in live time, was able to just very gently pour himself a glass of water. And the change was just dramatic. It was just so amazing to see. And the one thing that I most remember, besides just that visual, was him talking about how that device is reversible. So at any time you decide that you don't want it anymore, it's completely reversible, can be removed without any damage to the body.
Correct. Yep, it is. What they're coming out with now is just amazing, with all the different treatment modalities and that they have, which is, we're so fortunate. I think about people way back in earlier times. Oh, even when I was in nursing school in the 70s, they didn't hardly have anything. They thought dopamine, when they first came out with it, was the cure, but they learned quickly it wasn't. So.
Yeah, we've been learning so much about so many of the diseases of aging, including dementia and everything else, that it's really a wonderful time now that we realize that they are not death sentences anymore, as you mentioned. And we don't have to feel that way. There are things we can do about them. But also, as you mentioned, it's getting that diagnosis, number one, correct. And number two, getting it early enough that you're able to slow down that progression. So I guess my big question is, for someone who is worried about themselves or a family member that they think they might have Parkinson's, that some of the symptoms that you described, clicks with them. Yeah, that's what I'm living with. What is the first step? Who should they first contact in order to get the testing and to get an accurate diagnosis?
A lot of people will go to their primary care physician first. In fact, we did. And as soon as the primary care saw it, we put all the symptoms together. He says, okay, you're going to need to see a neurologist. So this was, again, there was only one neurologist, and he didn't even realize who that one was, to be honest with you. So he sent us to a generic neurologist. That individual immediately said, yes, you have Parkinson's. We can start medication, but you really need to see a movement disorder. And there's one, I think, in Dallas. And we were like, oh my goodness. But fortunately, we were able to find one. So to answer your question is to go to their general practitioner first, to rule out anything else that's possibly going on. But definitely go on and get in with a movement disorder specialist. And of course, any of the support groups can help them find it. There is a registry of the different ones. I will be more than happy if they hang on to our information. But more important is you need to see one of these doctors to be treated correctly and with the latest medications.
And, as we've talked about before in this series, sometimes as caregivers and as patients ourselves, we have to advocate for ourselves. Yes. Because a lot of times our medical professionals, they don't know everything. And when we're talking about something so specialized as Parkinson's, that, as you mentioned, it's when you were in school not that very long ago, there wasn't the wealth of information that we have now.
Right.
And so knowing that we may have to tell our primary care physician, I need a referral specifically to a movement specialist neurologist, is something just to keep in the back of your mind.
Right.
And
In fact, go on.
I'm sorry, go right ahead.
Well, I was going to say, when you talked about advocating, you're so right. You're so very right. What I've also learned, and we share with people, and particularly in our support group, but to anyone like now, when they go in a hospital, because many times they'll have to go in a hospital or different things, the hospital does not even have these specialized Parkinson meds. So oftentimes you might have to take your own meds. But the key thing is with Parkinson meds is you have to take them specifically on time, and they can't be taken with protein. There's just a whole different thing that you need to learn about. So this is where we even train. We have a caregiver support group that we even go through with our caregivers. These are some essential things you need to know. And especially if you're hospitalized, you need to be the advocate, as well as if you're going to, other doctors, of what's going on with the medication. So you hit it right there. We have to be advocates.
Yes, and that's exactly why we have this podcast series, is because knowledge is power for us, both as caregivers and as we age. We want to age well. And so knowing what's coming, what we need to work with, it will help us so that we can continue to live these fulfilling lives. And as you mentioned, Parkinson's is not a death sentence. And here in Central Texas, we have so many amazing resources, and GAPS being one of the primary ones. So Mary Jane, thank you so much for spending the time with us today to help explain to us not only what Parkinson's is, but how we can live successfully with it, and how we can help support our family members who are living with it as well. So thank you so much for that. And as always, your website is just a wealth of information and great support. So thank you for sharing that with us as well. And also wanted to remind you, as I always do, and as Mary Jane pointed out, there's never, ever any shame in asking for help, because all of us need it at some point in our life. And especially when we're dealing with something difficult like Parkinson's or dementia, we need to ask for help because no one ever trained us how to be specialists in this. So having those support groups, having those organizations like the Georgetown Area Parkinson's Support Group, having those resources at your fingertips, that's why we exist. That's why Age of Central Texas is here. That's why GAPS is here. We are here to help you in your journey with those resources. So never feel any shame or embarrassment in reaching out for that help. Mary Jane.
And I just do want to say, Rob, I love y'all's group. It's wonderful. In fact, I was on a national panel and I was sharing about Age of Central Texas and how fortunate we, GAPS, is to have y'all, and to the different programs that you put on for the caregivers and just everything. So kudos back to you big time. I mean, y'all do a fabulous job, and thank you.
Well, thank you. And the feeling is mutual. And it's wonderful that all of our organizations here in Central Texas do work together, because we all have the same goal. We want Central Texas to be the best place in the nation to grow older and to do it successfully. So Mary Jane, again, thank you so much for joining us. I so appreciate your time. For those of you who watched our video, thank you for spending the time with us, and join us again every first Wednesday. We're live on Zoom, and then of course all of our recordings are here on YouTube, so you can look through our library and find other topics as well. We hope that you have a wonderful day and have a fabulous rest of your year. Thank you.